We've just spent the last 10 minutes talking about a political process a lot of younger First Nations people don't really believe is going to work because, and it's a fact, they've been making a lot more progress in another way.
There are basically two avenues First Nations have been using to try to improve their living conditions and rights. Negotiations with various governments over the years and using the Canadian courts. The Harper government and previous ones try to work through the Assembly of First Nations, currently headed by Sean Atleo. He was elected by the chiefs, and there are two ways that they get to be chiefs. They can either inherit the position, or in a growing number of places are elected by their band or reserve. So Atleo technically is only a representative of the chiefs, not the million-plus Aboriginal people. Kind of like Gary Bettman representing the NHL owners, not the health of the game. Decades of this structure has led to a lot of process, a lot of good words, but minimal change. But over here, through the courts, First Nations people have been making tremendous progress. Individuals and bands have been improving resource rights, fishing rights, and this week expanded the definition to include Métis and off-reserve nations. The Idle No More movement believes that this is where power lies now, in the people exerting their rights. It's worked, bringing millions in corporate investment and court-ordered settlements.
Well, we're joined now by three people who come at all of this from slightly different perspectives. And we should also mention that the AFN was unable to provide someone for this discussion. We're joined now in Toronto by Pam Palmater, who has been speaking for the Idle No More movement. She also, by the way, ran unsuccessfully for the AFN National Chief. Here in studio in Ottawa, Grand Chief Stan Louttit has been by Chief Spence's side throughout this, and Wab Kinew has been in town all week. Normally, though, he's the Director of Indigenous Inclusion at the University of Winnipeg. Wab, I want to start with you, because you're kind of the outsider here. You sort of came into town on Thursday, and suddenly you were right in the middle of it all. You were at Rideau Hall, you were talking to people, you were in the demonstrations. At the end of the day, how do you view the political results of all that's gone on?
Well, I think it's tremendously interesting and exciting, first of all. My analysis of what happened this week is essentially we saw the two different approaches amongst First Nations politicians on display here. So on the one hand, you have the leaders who really believe that implementing and honoring the treaties is the way to achieve results for First Nations people. And on the other side, you have maybe those who are more concerned with economic development and prioritizing that as a way to achieve material benefits for people on reserve. And that was on full display because you saw the one side attending the Prime Minister's meeting and you saw the other side attending the Governor General's meeting. And I think there was only about one chief that attended both meetings, so there's very little overlap there. What I'm excited by is a potential, because I think that there's very important things from both approaches. I think that they can achieve meaningful results for people in First Nations and Aboriginal people generally. So what I'm excited by is the prospect that maybe we can get those two hands talking to each other and coordinate their actions forward with an eye on making change for people on the ground.
Well, and Grand Chief, there's a third hand in this, and that's the federal government. That it looks like that this file has been kicked up to the Prime Minister's office, which is always a good thing with this government because things get done when Prime Minister Harper's paying attention to them. How do you view the political progress this week?
It's been a very interesting week in a sense that our position has not changed. That we would like to meet with the Prime Minister and the Governor General together. That was made very clear to the Governor General.
You're speaking on behalf of Chief Spence here.
I'm speaking on behalf of Chief Spence, and as well the fact that the meeting went on and there were some results, I guess that were talked about. Then I think it's an opportunity to build on that.
But a lot of people look at that, you know, Chief, and they say, you know, we're now getting down to such small issues. There have been discussions, there have been meetings, that it's time, and we heard this from the Quebec Grand Chief, that it's time for Chief Spence to say that she's had an impact, which she has, and to move on and to stop her liquid diet.
Yes, she has. She has had an impact. But I think we have to remember, and we have to build on what everybody seems to be saying. The Prime Minister said at the Crown First Nations gathering in January 2012 that he wants to build on treaty relationships. He's saying that. We're saying that. So let's say together, and let's bring in the appropriate parties to make that that good discussion, which is bringing in the Governor General as well.
Okay, Pam Palmater, let's go to you in Toronto with this. You watched, and you've been tweeting today retweeting, I guess, some things about people feeling betrayed by Chief Atleo. In your mind, is the AFN as an organization a spent force, or is it just a question, as the Liberals have and many other parties have, a question of confidence in leadership?
Well, I think it's really been, this week at least, it's really been a divisive force, because you can see in the weeks leading up to this meeting with the Prime Minister that most First Nations across the country and the people on the ground who are in this Indigenous rights movement are really talking the same things. They were opposing legislation that would be destructive to their communities and to Canadians as a whole. They were calling for the Prime Minister to deal with the crisis in First Nation communities, lack of water, housing, infrastructure, and that kind of thing, and also to deal with the fundamental treaty relationship and inherent right relationship, which is about sharing the lands and resources for the benefit of all First Nations and Canadians. And that was a real unifying message. However, leading up to this meeting, the majority of the chiefs in Ottawa at the time were also unified in terms of how this meeting would take place. It was AFN that decided to go on a different trajectory, and nothing came out of that meeting. So what happens is the grassroots people and leaders on the ground have walked away with nothing out of this.
Wab?
Well, I hear what Pam's saying, because I was in the room at the AFN meeting on Thursday night, and you did see what appeared to be consensus emerging. One region after another got up and said, we're going to support Chief Spence, meaning we're going to sit the meeting.
Boycott the meeting.
Exactly, boycott the meeting. And then some of the people who did attend the meeting were in the room, but they didn't raise the fact that they wanted to go to the meeting. And I think that was a missed opportunity to create dialogue. At least there would have been the chance there to say, okay, you guys are going to go to the meeting, we're going to sit out, but here's a message that we want you to take in from the people who are not going to be there. So that's a missed opportunity. I think there's two other things to think about here, though. One is that there is the Idle No More movement, which isn't allegiant to any particular First Nations politician or any politician, for that matter at all.
No, it's an anti-political
exactly,
movement
and so likely you're going to see the direction of the Idle No More movement continue to reflect whatever is the feeling on the street level for Aboriginal people and First Nations people in Canada, regardless of which direction the politicians take. And so it's going to be key to watch how those rallies and demonstrations evolve. And beyond that, the second thing that I want to remind people about is that Idle No More, a big source of its strength is from the urban centers in Canada. And what we're talking about here is the First Nations politicians who specifically represent the First Nations concerns. There's a whole lot of Métis people, there's a whole lot of Inuit people, and there's a whole lot of non-status Aboriginal people involved in the movement. And we're not seeing a whole lot of engagement with their political representatives.
I want to talk about the Idle No More movement because in some ways, and I saw it too, I mean, when Chief Spence left, Grand Chief left Rideau Hall because there had been, I guess, a ceremonial belt had been laid out that didn't seem to be laid out in the proper form. And, we are all learning about these things. I mean, I walked through some sweetgrass smoke that I shouldn't have, and we're learning about the cultural things. But it occurs to me as somebody who has traveled the world that we're seeing in Canada now, not only street demonstrations, but I'm interested in your perspective. Are we seeing a rise or the introduction of a more fundamentalist view of First Nations politics?
I think it is. The Idle No More movement is something that's gaining strength, and I think we need to build on that. There's some people who say, well, the Idle No More is got nothing to do with the chiefs. It's grassroots, but well, how do you define grassroots? If you're in an elected position, if you don't work at the band office, are you not a grassroots? Or so who is a grassroots? I consider myself a grassroots. I'm elected by the people of my region. So I see that as a positive thing, and I think the grassroots Idle No More movement, as it's called, needs the chiefs, and the chiefs needs Idle No More. So I think together we can do some very, very good things, and we're doing it.
All right, but Pam, let me ask about that question about where we're seeing a new brand, a new flavor of First Nations activism here, and whether it is in the way it's playing out a more fundamentalist movement.
No, I don't see it as a fundamentalist movement at all. This movement, in fact, isn't new. It didn't start with the Idle No More hashtag and the call to action. There have been Indigenous activists working in this movement for many, many years, trying to help bring First Nations leaders up to speed on what's coming down the road from the Prime Minister, helping to work with grassroots people. I mean, look at, you've got defenders of the land, you have individual First Nations who have been defending their lands and activists for years. This is just another part of it. And the Idle No More movement it's not an, it itself is not an organization, but what you're seeing is grassroots people and leaders on the ground and all of these Indigenous activists using the peace and friendship concept of the treaties, using the peaceful ways of their culture and ceremonies to share with Canadians and help educate Canadians in a way to try to get them to stand with them in solidarity. And it has worked. At every peaceful traffic slowdown, at every peaceful march or every peaceful round dance, you have just as many Canadians standing with First Nations because they're starting to realize what is at stake here also impacts their future generations.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, and I would tend to agree with you. I think we've all been doing a lot of studying and learning in the last couple of weeks about First Nations issues. Wab Kinew, Grand Chief Stan Louttit, and Palmater, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Miigwech.
Thanks.